Republicans are trying to refocus their party after an uncertain midterm election cycle. Congress is now split, with the GOP in control of the House, but it will ultimately be up to three power centers within the party: Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell, new House Speaker Kevin McCarthy, and the presidential candidates to effectively redefine the GOP in order to take back the White House in 2024. For more on this, let's bring in Ramesh Ponnuru. He's the editor of the National Review. Ramesh, I want to start with the opening gambit from the House Republicans, which is to announce the Oversight Committee that they're going to be investigating President Biden, but really Hunter Biden. What do you make of that as the opening move coming after this midterm election?
Well, of course, it depends on the direction that they take it and what they uncover. But at first glance, it is a sign of a new majority in the House that is more concerned about managing its own base and playing to the crowd of people it already has than about expanding its reach and appealing to people who aren't already part of that base.
What is your interpretation of the various interpretations of what happened on Election Day? There's been a lot of finger pointing. There's been some leadership challenges. Donald Trump, we can talk about that in a minute. But how do you sort through what the various different ways are that conservatives are looking at what happened and what needs to happen to build a governing majority?
I think there are a lot of internal debates in the Republican Party, as often happens in a party when its election results are disappointing compared to what it expected. But I think that the overall pattern of results had a pretty unmistakable message. It's hard to miss that the Trumpier a candidate was, the more a candidate indulged the mythology about Trump having won the 2020 election and having it stolen from him, the worse they did in competitive districts, the higher a penalty voters imposed on those candidates. And that, I think, is a big reason why you've seen so much of the Republican Party signal that it's time to move past Trump since the election.
And we have seen other signals, taking what you say, we have seen other times where people have talked about moving away from former President Trump, and that has not happened. What do you think makes this time different?
Well, it's absolutely true that there have been previous moments when Republican elites wanted to be rid of Trump. The question is whether Republican voters are there. Now, there's some polling that has been suggesting for some time that Republican voters were stopping thinking of themselves as primarily Trump voters and more thinking of themselves as Republican voters. There's some polling this week that suggests that Ron DeSantis, the governor of Florida, has overtaken President Trump in Republican affections, but that's what it's going to take. I think it's pretty clear that Republican voters are in the driver's seat and not their so-called leaders.
You and I grew up with the cliche of the three-legged stool in the Republican Party: the national security conservatives, the cultural conservatives, the fiscal conservatives. What are the groups now in the conservative movement, and what's your sense of their, it's shifting, of course, but of their relative size in the shape of the party now?
Well, it's not so much that the groups are different, but what they themselves stand for is different, right? So the social conservatives of 2022 are very different from the social conservatives of 2002, right? The social conservatives of 2002 were dead set against same-sex marriage and had public opinion on their side. Now, the public favors same-sex marriage, and social conservatives are aware that that looks like, from their point of view, a lost cause. Economic conservatives, I think, are still an important part of the Republican coalition. It's why Trump cut taxes, and that was one of his major successes as president. But there's more willingness on the part of Republicans to engage in protectionism, and so there's been some slippage there. And then finally, there's a much more working class, culturally conservative component of the Republican Party. You don't have the strong pro-immigration wing of the party that you once did.
And so, as a final question, Ramesh, what does the policy future look like for somebody who's trying to take the Republican Party into a new place? If the constituency is a little bit different, is there an obvious policy roadmap that could be achieved, assuming everybody got in line and behaved?
Well, I think there's not, I don't think it's obvious. I don't think it's as simple as taking something off the cupboard. I think that it is a time that Republicans need to be devising new policies. How consistent with a conservative philosophy of government can Republicans meet the concerns of today's voters, and especially today's working class voters? It's not with the agenda of 1981, but it's not, I think, with the mismatch of policies and even more tweets that we got from President Trump when he was in office.
All right, Ramesh Ponnuru, good to be with you. Thanks for being with us.
You're welcome.